So I'm going to try and keep this video as brief as possible because I'm basically going to be complaining about something that doesn't really matter at all on the grand scheme of things. Not that such a thing doesn't tend to make up for hour-long videos on the combat sports YouTube space. So Edgar Berlanga vs Hamza Shiraz will be the main event of the Ring 3 card in New York tomorrow night, and the fight between Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda for the WBC lightweight title is the co-main event. It is being promoted as a sort of double header or double main event, but Berlanga vs Shiraz is going on last, so that is just simply the main event. There can only be one main event, and that's the fight that goes on last. Now to me, Shakur Stevenson vs William Zepeda is simply a way bigger fight than Berlanga vs Shiraz, and Shakur vs Zepeda should be the main event tomorrow night. I know Berlanga is from New York, and this fight is in New York, but since when did the fight that goes on last have to consist of a hometown boy? How often do guys main event in New York who are both not from New York? They're going to see their hometown guy fight anyway, so why must it go on last? The hometown stuff doesn't have to take precedence over what is a higher level fight as the main event. Plus, I'm hearing that Edgar Berlanga is nowhere near as big in New York as he makes out to be. Well, that's not a surprise because most people don't give a bollocks about boxing, but even by the standards of a boxer apparently. First of all, Shakur Stevenson vs William Zepeda is actually a world title fight, unlike Berlanga vs Shiraz. And Shakur Stevenson vs William Zepeda is actually an anticipated fight that had been spoken about a lot a good while before this fight was made. It's almost as if Zepeda's promoter Oscar de la Hoya has been building him up specifically for a shot at Shakur Stevenson. And Shakur has even accused Zepeda of ducking him in the past and not challenging him when he had the chance to. So this is a world title fight and there is a lot more story to it. Shakur Stevenson is an undefeated freeweight world champion who boasts 2 defences of that WBC lightweight title that he currently holds, and Zepeda is also undefeated and he's the WBC interim lightweight champion. He won the vacant interim title against Tevin Farmer last year and made 1 interim title defence against Farmer in the rematch. Oh, and by the way, Zepeda was on a pretty solid run leading up to that first interim title fight with Farmer. So Stevenson vs Zepeda is a highly anticipated fight between 2 undefeated guys, the reigning WBC lightweight champion and the WBC interim champ who has undeniably earned his chance at the full title. Edgar Berlanga vs Hamza Shiraz now. They are both top level fighters and this should be a good fight. But before we get into levels here, this is really just a random fight. Granted, it's a random fight where you look at it and go, yeah, that ought to be a good one, but there's no backstory here at all. Hamza Shiraz is making his debut at super middleweight, so they just happen to match him up with Berlanga. Nothing wrong with a random fight at all, but how does this go over a fight as storied as Shakur Stevenson vs William Zepeda? You would tend to build the card around a storied world title fight and stick a random but fun unexpected non-world title fight like this on the undercard. Berlanga vs Shiraz ain't even an interim title fight. It's a WBC eliminator apparently. I don't think it would be a final eliminator though, as the WBC already have an interim champ at 168 in Christian and Billy who just won that vacant interim strap the other week. And now in regards to levels, I'm not saying that a fight between 2 undefeated guys is automatically bigger than a fight between guys where that is not the case, but Edgar Berlanga is not known for any of his wins. That's because he hasn't really beaten anyone of note, not even a token former world champion on his resume. He's literally just known for his loss to Canelo. And I do like Berlanga, but the way he lives off of that loss is a bit embarrassing to be honest. He's this New Yorican hero now apparently because he went the distance against a past his prime Canelo in a fight that wasn't really close anyway, and Canelo cherry picked him as the opponent. And that was the one time Berlanga fought for a world title. And as for Hamza Shiraz, he fought for a world title once, which was in his very last fight. And he fell short when he fought to a draw against Carlos Adames when challenging for Adames' WBC middleweight title. But Shiraz got shown levels by Adames in that fight, and Adames should have won this fight like 119-109, if not 118-110. Given that a draw was a pure robbery against Adames, but at least it was a draw and not a loss for Adames, so he kept his title. So I guess they didn't want to give Hamza Shiraz a loss because he is a Riyadh season ambassador. Boy did he get fraud checked there though. And much like Berlanga, Shiraz ain't got the best resume at all either. You know, also doesn't even have the cheeky win over an ex-world champion. Oh yeah, and on the Riyadh season ambassador stuff, Berlanga vs Shiraz ain't just the main event because of Berlanga, you know, because he's from New York and all that. It's also because of Hamza Shiraz being Turkey's boy. And obviously this is the Ring Magazine free card, and Ring Magazine are owned by Turkel Al-Sheikh. And by the way, this is nothing against Hamza Shiraz, and it's nothing against Turkel Al-Sheikh either for pushing Hamza Shiraz and putting him in such a position, but I do just think Shiraz is a bit overrated, and let's just say the position he's in doesn't match the level of fighter that he is. Now, 2 other reasons that one might say that Berlanga vs Shiraz is rightfully the main event over Stevenson Zepeda is that Berlanga Shiraz is closer on the odds, and it is due to be a more fun fight than Stevenson Zepeda. Now these two factors go hand in hand for me because they both play into the factor of anticipation for Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda. William Zepeda is a massive underdog here and he is expected to be outboxed by the much more decorated Shakur Stevenson, but the question of whether or not William Zepeda's relentless pressure will be able to cause Shakur any problems is a really interesting one, because Zepeda may very well be outboxed, but he most likely will not relent and he will push the action all night, so we'll see how that turns out. And as for the excitement stuff, people think that Shakur being in this fight will make it boring, because he's a runner. But that runner and boring narrative mainly comes from the Edwin De Los Santos fight. He's fought twice since the Edwin De Los Santos fight but didn't run in either of those fights. Perhaps he could have let his hands go a bit more against Harutunian, but he was in the pocket in that fight. That definitely wasn't an amazing fight at all, but the Shakur Stevenson being boring gimmick really became a thing at that point, like in the mainstream. So that Harutunian fight was held to such high scrutiny, and as long as Shakur didn't put a real beating on Harutunian, he would have got clowned anyway. Then against Josh Padley, his last fight, Shakur obviously beat Padley up to the body and stopped him. And even if Shakur is going to run against Zepeda and stink the place out, again, that very question adds the anticipation factor of this fight. It's so unpredictable. And let's not rule out Zepeda's chances of closing the distance on a retreating Shakur. Let's not underestimate Zepeda here. I know there are all these talks about running after the Canelo vs William Skull fight and the Devin Haney vs Jose Ramirez fight a couple months ago. You know, those fights happening on the same weekend. But this Shakur vs Zepeda fight literally can't be like either of those fights. You could say that Canelo got ran away from by Skull and that Ramirez got ran away from by Haney, and whether or not you are someone who thinks that there is more onus on both Canelo and Ramirez to cut the ring off in those scenarios, what can't be denied is that William Zepeda's style of pressure is way more relentless than both Canelo's and Jose Ramirez's, and Zepeda has a way higher output than them. Not that Zepeda is a better fighter than those two, but Zepeda is more likely to just rush at a guy who is retreating from him, as opposed to taking basic patient steps to the left and right to try and cut the ring off that might not pay off against excessive disengagement. So yeah, Shakur ain't gonna run against Zepeda. I think that narrative is rather ridiculous. But even if he did, I still think that this fight will be eventful, as Zepeda will push the action hard, unlike both Canelo and Jose Ramirez the other month. So yeah, I just wanted to give my little casual take on why Shakur vs Zepeda should have been the elected main event over Berlanga vs Shiraz on this ring-free card. It don't matter obviously, as we get to see both fights anyway, but I do just find it a bit bizarre that Berlanga Shiraz is going on last. I know there are all these fanboy and hater narratives these days, so let me just say, I'm definitely not a fanboy of either Shakur Stevenson or William Zepeda, nor am I a hater of either Edgar Berlanga or Hamza Shiraz, but I just think that Shakur Stevenson vs William Zepeda is a way higher level and a way more relevant fight than Edgar Berlanga vs Hamza Shiraz due to the positions that each man in each respective fight are currently in. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts in the comments, and you have been listening to O.M.E. Boxing.